My name is Ericson Harrell. I'm a North Miami Beach police officer. I'm currently under internal affairs investigation, not because I've unlawfully arrested someone, not because I use excessive force, not because I use drugs or look at kiddie porn, but because I dare question something in the mainstream media. And what I questioned was the Parkland shooting in particular. The 5 faces of the Parkland shooting survivors, I call them actors and actresses, just because I don't believe that they're actually survivors or victims.
Now, a comment like that, where you obviously have the First Amendment right to say that can unsettle some people, which I've heard. I mean, people haven't been responding to me because they're Facebook friends with me, saying, "Who is this friend of yours who's saying all this stuff?" And what do you mean by actors? Do you mean there maybe it just didn't happen, that he created the whole thing, that there may be no shooting that took place? Or what do you mean by that?
I believe that they may be being used as puppets for a government agenda. Cameron Kasky actually acknowledged himself that he was an actor since the age of 3. So, he's definitely an actor. And David Hogg, I believe, he's looking to pursue a career in acting. But what I'm basically saying is that they're being used as a gun control puppets. They're being moved from one state to another. They're being compensated, so they're being paid, I would imagine. And that they're acting. I don't know if you saw the Emma Gonzalez when she was in D.C. She put on a great show. I mean, if that wasn't an act, I don't know what was. She stood there for 6 minutes trying to get some tears to come out. And for me, that was just more evidence that something's just not right. Doesn't fit the smell test.
So you believe she was fake crying or fake tears?
I believe she was trying to get some tears out to make it look good. Carlos, I've been a cop, like you said, almost 20 years. I've seen real emotion. I've seen real tears. I've seen real blood. And a lot of these things that I call hoaxes or crisis actors, it just doesn't look real to me. As a 20-year cop, I have to question it.
Now, you said earlier that one reason you believe this may be a hoax is you haven't seen all the evidence. But at the same time, this is not your agency investigating it. You as a cop know that they didn't always tell everybody it was all going on during an investigation.
Correct. And I wouldn't expect to see all the evidence, being outside of the investigation. But what little bit they do show us, it just doesn't, what they're telling us doesn't fit the little bit of evidence that they're showing us. I have an issue with some of the timeline. I have an issue with some of the alleged witnesses' statements on the scene. So for me,
what, for example?
Well, there was one teacher, I can't recall her name at the time, but one teacher said she saw a gentleman wearing body armor, a gas mask, and almost looked like a SWAT officer. But this was before, what's his name, Nicholas Cruz was in custody. So my question is, as an investigator, who did she see? What was it?
I mean, isn't there a possibility that there could have been a SWAT team member before he was in custody responding to the shooting?
Sure, well, if that's the case, they didn't acknowledge any SWAT officers in the school in body armor at the time. So again, as an investigator, I would love to see the timeline. Where was she in the school, and who was the officer, that she saw in body armor and the gas mask, things like that. So as an investigator, I have to ask questions when these things don't match up.
And did you also believe the Sandy Hook shooting was a hoax?
Did you say a Sandy Hook? I believe the Sandy Hook.
Sandy Hook. I'm sorry, Sandy Hook.
Yes. When I look at the evidence that they released about Sandy Hook, and again, the MO, when these shootings, these so-called shootings, they all fit this narrative. You get parents that I don't see any real genuine tears. You get witnesses all with the conflicting. I know that happens in investigation, witnesses with conflicting statements. You get, where am I going? You get things that didn't make sense, like, I don't know if you know that apparently no air rescue was summoned for any of the children in Sandy Hook. So again, it's like, why wouldn't they do these certain things? So that leads me to question a lot of that.
So who would be behind all this?
That's the million-dollar question. I believe people with deep pockets, people that have access to control the media, people that have access to control law enforcement investigations, people that have access to pay off alleged witnesses and things like that. And we know the more money you have, people worship money, and you can get people to do almost anything for the love of money.
But of course, now a lot of people are going to point out that the NRA lobbies and they pay a lot of money to the politicians. So what do you say about that? I
mean, I believe the NRA doesn't even make the top 20 lobbyists when it comes to money coming from corporations to fund the government. So I don't even believe that. I believe the NRA, much like all of these shootings, they need a scapegoat. They need someone that they can point the finger at to say, this person's to blame, this is the cause. But we never addressed the case or the issue of mental health in America.
Right. Now, what else did you think was a hoax or involved crisis actors?
Well, crisis actors, I go as far back as 9/11. I tell a lot of people 9/11 was my red pill moment. When I started investigating 9/11, I started, again, as an investigator, I'm asking questions. Why didn't certain things happen? Some things that defied logic and physics, like 3 buildings collapsing due to fire, which in my research has never happened since 9/11, before or after 9/11. I mean, I just watched a video of a cell phone tower fully engulfed. And my first question, did it collapse like World Trade Center 7? Which it didn't, because fire and, you know, the science of metals, it doesn't work that way. The physics don't happen that way. So I've been calling out 9/11, Sandy Hook, you know, JFK assassination. I'll go as far back as that. The LA shooting that just happened at the concert. Again, there's some things that they're telling us. The Vegas shooting, yes, sir. There's some things that they're telling us that just doesn't make sense. It defies logic.
So you believe that the Vegas shooting, where I think 59 people were killed, they say they were killed, was also a hoax, and maybe not many people got killed?
Again, when I say a hoax, something happened. Obviously, we saw a whole bunch of video. We saw a bunch of people running. Do I believe that a bump stock was the culprit? No. But again, how quickly were they to blame the bump stock and create legislation to ban bump stocks before the investigation was even complete? So again, I would question the Vegas shooting as well. I just think when I say it's a hoax, I believe there's more to it than meets the eye.
Did you read the article a couple of days ago that Alex Jones, who runs InfoWars, where he used to say Sandy Hook was a hoax, and then he was sued by the parents of some of those kids, and now he's saying it was not a hoax?
Right. I did. And again, these things, when these shootings happen, they're attacking the Second Amendment, and the next thing is what I'm going through, I guess what Alex Jones is going through, is the First Amendment. You're not allowed to question. You know, we live in the land of the free, home of the brave, but now you're being sued if you dare question. You know, why can't I say I don't believe it without being sued or being put under internal affairs investigation?
What was tell me about the policy that they are trying to enforce against you?
To tell you the truth, I have not been formally advised of a policy violation. I don't know if it's because I offended someone or if it's because maybe they're currently looking to see if I posted a Facebook post on duty. I really don't know at this time. So
I mean, I know that there are a lot of departments, a lot of government agencies with very vague policies.
Right.
And, you know, I'd be interested to know what it is that they're trying to sweep up here, because, you know, truth be told, I don't care what your opinions are one way or the other.
Right. Right.
But if, you know, I think a lot of citizens like to give cops grief and say, I pay your salary.
Right.
Well, yes, I do, and thus, you are a government employee. Right. You have full right to you know, full First Amendment rights unless you're actually on duty at the time.
Right.
This is what troubles me.
Right.
I'm not troubled by any of your opinions.
Exactly.
You know, I don't share them.
Right.
But, you know,
right.
I don't need to. Your beliefs can stand
and why?
To mine.
And why can't we have a disagreement without, you know, people wanting to throw you under, put you in prison?
I don't care if every single thing you have to say is absolutely batshit crazy.
Right.
If it makes me think, it was worth hearing.
And thank you, sir.
And it makes me think, so why not?
And that's something. Part of my Facebook, Carlos. Part of my Facebook is meant to make people think. You know, I created my new Facebook page under my new profile in order to make people. I don't post any pornography. I try not to use swear words. Now I'm comfortable enough that my child, my 10-year-old daughter, can look at my page and she can read a post that I posted and make her think. And that's, for me, education is big for me. Since I've started reading and teaching myself a little bit about the history of the country and the history of the Constitution, I've been born again.
Now, how many Facebook friends do you have on your personal page?
Well, I had one page before I got logged out and I couldn't get back in. My current page has about 800 friends.
Okay, and how many of those Facebook friends are cops?
Very few. Not many of them, if they are, acknowledge that they are. Maybe a handful.
And how many of them are police accountability activists like myself?
Oh, probably an overwhelming majority of them.
Yeah. Right, so you're very unique in that regard. And tell us about how you arrived to become a police accountability activist, even though you are a police officer.
Yes, sir. Again, my red pill was, investigating 9/11. And from there, I stumbled on to the Constitution, which, again, I don't speak for my agency, but I had to go out and learn the Constitution myself. I had to go and study it. And what I started to recognize is, for 20 years of my career, I haven't been taught the Constitution. I had to go out and research it myself and read some of the passages of Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, Samuel Adams, and I started to recognize that we're completely off course where we're going. And when I started looking at pages like yourself, PNAC, I started recognizing that here in America, the police don't seem to love the people that they're serving. There's this idea of do as I say, not as I do. I'm God, I'm the police officer, I carry the gun, you don't, so you do as I say. Don't question me. And the minute you start questioning a law enforcement officer, that's when they become aggressive. Many people will say, well, just so do what you're told. Again, that's not the American way. And if you just do what you're told, you'll never have an issue with a police officer. But the second you attempt to exercise your rights, now you're going to have a problem. And that's where, and the further we allow this, this is what's going to allow, we're building this police state that you can see I'm wearing. A police state is great as long as you're a police. And I recognize that I won't always be a police officer. I got a few more years left. I recognize that many of my friends aren't police officers, and if I stayed quiet when I see what's happening, then I'm complicit in the building of the police state.
I think you said something that was very interesting, that your cops are sworn to honor their oath, supposedly, right?
Correct.
But they're not taught the Constitution?
Right.
So how does that work out?
Which for me is a big red flag, and I still ask that today. It was like, we raise our hand before man and God, yet if I dare bring it up in roll call, I'm called a sovereign citizen, which obviously I'm not. I'm just learning the Constitution and learning what rights and liberties and the pursuit of happiness is all about, which for my colleagues that don't understand this, for them is foreign to them.
Right. So they don't teach you anything about the First Amendment in the police academy?
I just recently looked at a curriculum book for the police academy. I believe there's 1.5 pages directed at the Constitution. So that's probably a day's worth of,
And what do they cover
discussion.
exactly?
I believe I saw it was the Bill of Rights and maybe some case law on First Amendment, Second Amendment, and Fourth Amendment. But it doesn't go into detail of the history of the Constitution.
Do they talk about cameras in public, citizens recording them at all?
Probably very little. They probably address the issue that people are allowed to record. But again, you can teach that in the academy. But once you're out on the road, I have the badge and you don't. So put the camera down.
So how does that? Is there a big difference what you learn in the police academy and then what you learn on the streets?
Yeah, definitely. The police academy is basic police knowledge. Just bare enough. What's a homicide? What's a burglary? What's a theft? When you get out on the street, then that's when you get into a little bit what you're allowed to get away with. Yeah, I can pull you over, and yes, you have a right to your property and your vehicle. But if I smell marijuana, now I can pull you out of your vehicle and I can search your vehicle. And if I should find anything illicit, now I tow your vehicle, and it's just, yeah, it doesn't go into respecting people's rights and liberties.
Have you done that before?
Before I was educated on life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, yes. Yeah.
And you don't do that anymore? I
don't do that anymore. Now, I recognize the average person is trying to get from point A to point B. They're trying to make a living just like everyone else. But because we have a statute book this thick, I can come up with any reason to pull you out of your car and violate your rights and under the color of law. Now I have a different opinion or belief as far as victimless crimes. I believe that there's no individual harm. I have no issue with the person. Unless you steal something, take something from someone, hurt someone, where there's an actual victim involved, get me involved. But other than that, I have no interest in enforcing a victimless crime law.
And do your superiors, do they say anything about that?
We don't have a quota per se, but as far as traffic, I must give it in my agency's defense. If I write you a warning, that's considered a citation. That's considered good enough. As far as my stats, if you want to get promoted, I'm sure they're going to look at your arrest records, your citation record, and your history. So there's no quota, but if you want to get promoted, I'm sure they expect to see productivity.
So tell us what happened when you learned you were under investigation.
Well, I was called in. Like I said, I still haven't been formally advised of the policy I violated, and they basically told me I was reassigned to desk duty, which was upgraded to staying at home for safety reasons. I don't know if that's for my safety or because I'm talking about the Constitution. They think that somehow makes me a threat to them. So I really don't know.
Well, I mean, I've always known that safety, when police say safety, they actually mean control. So it seems like they want to keep you under control by not allowing you to leave your home because you're not allowed to leave your home while you're supposed to be on duty, correct?
Correct. I've been reassigned to administrative leave at home with pay, and I need to be at home from 8 to 5. You know, I jokingly say it's a house arrest. I just can't leave my sidewalk, and I don't have an ankle bracelet on.
And did they seize your computers?
They didn't seize my computer, but I definitely left it at the station because I didn't want any more allegations involved.
And I read where the posts that you posted are no longer on Facebook.
Right.
Did you remove those voluntarily, or did they tell you to remove those?
Voluntarily. I got tired of. I knew before my page was being watched, but now it's like constant surveillance. So I just put it on private just to kind of give myself a little peace and quiet.
Right. And you also have a YouTube channel.
I do. The Penitent Cop?
Yeah, tell us about that.
The Penitent Cop. I came up with that term. Penitent, if you don't know, means to be repentant for some wrong that you've done. And I consider it a wrong that I've done in the 15 years before I became aware of what I was doing. That I arrested hundreds of people, written thousands of tickets for people just trying, again, like I said, just trying to get by. And I believe I've probably done more harm to that percentage of the population than I would have if I just left them alone. So penitent, meaning I'm sorry, and I tell people I'm genuinely sorry for the things that I've done. And, now I proceed to move forward with newfound knowledge. And my Penitent Cop page, my YouTube channel, is where I try to express my God honest truth about law enforcement and things like that.
Right. How many followers do you have right now?
Ooh, I believe it's slowly growing. I think I'm about 300 followers. I'm still kind of new to the YouTube because I used to watch a lot of videos, but I would never subscribe. Not that I'm a subscriber or have a channel myself, I can subscribe. So I get a few views. I got the few videos I have, I get a few hundred views on them.
Now, you've been a cop for 19 years. Were you planning on retiring next year?
In the next plus or minus 5, if this doesn't escalate the time. So in 2020, I'll be eligible to retire, and from that point on, I'll take it one day at a time.
So if this investigation results in your termination, what would happen to your pension?
Well, as far as I know, this is not what I've done was a policy violation. I don't believe policy violations would be a threat to my pension. I don't know, that they may create some kind of new policy to go, but I don't believe this would be an issue with my policy. So.
Right. And what are you going to do after you retire?
Believe it or not, I want to get into politics. Politics or some kind of independent media myself. I want to get out there with a camera. I want to ask the hard questions. Again, if I had a camera at the time or a nice camera and a mic, I would wanted to go over there to the Parkland shooting, just film and see what I can see for myself, prove to myself first and foremost what happened and things like that. So.
Did you go to the school afterwards, after the shooting?
I didn't go by immediately. I think I went by maybe a week later and just to surveil the area. I saw the flowers and some of the media still were out there, but I haven't gone any closer than that.
Right. And do you have any other questions, Mark?
As far as, do you have anybody else on your force who's been disciplined under the same policy that you're aware of?
Social media policy, well, not to the extent I am. I don't know if, I believe one other officer may have said something inappropriate on his Facebook page, but I don't think he was sent home and stripped of his badge and gun and taking his police car and things like that. So.
Now, yeah, we've seen, I follow this on a daily basis. I've seen a lot of racist comments from other cops, from other departments, a lot of really, really bad comments where, basically celebrating the death of somebody else who was killed by cops.
Right.
And they seem to be cool. They seem to be protected. I've never seen them get in trouble for the most part.
Right. And even that, I guess your agency might have an issue if you're calling someone a racial slur, because now that goes into whether or not you could treat everyone fairly in doing your police duties. But someone, again, not using profanity, not using racial slurs and things like that, I think it's a little bit overboard for
And your fellow cops, how do they treat you? How do they view you?
My brothers and sisters, some of them, they all love me. They know who I am. Again, like many people say, they may not agree with what I'm saying, but I think we can have a civil discourse and say, okay, that's crazy, but I don't think you're a serial killer just because you think differently. Most of them agree that I'm different from the officer that I was before, where I was making hundreds of arrests, thousands of tickets. And I tell people that what they're witnessing is a evolution, which is from simple to more complex. That's all I am.
Now, you've been contacted by other media sources for interviews?
The local paper, Sun Sentinel, and again, that's one reason I kind of put my page on private. And one reason I don't go to the mainstream media is I just don't have the trust in them that they would try to show who I am, effectively. I think they would try to spin it, so I don't trust the mainstream media.
And speaking of that, I want to give you the chance to say whatever you want to say. I do want to run this video in its entirety. So, you have anything you want to say that we haven't covered yet?
Again, I reached out to you because I met you a few times before, and I didn't go to the mainstream media because I don't trust them. And the articles that most of the local papers, and I don't know if some of the television shows may have picked, the news sites have picked up, basically trying to portray me as some kind of batshit crazy officer that doesn't that can't be trusted on the road to effectively do my job as a police officer. And what I wanted to show people is that I'm human. All I am is asking as an investigator. I wouldn't be an effective police officer if I didn't ask questions. If something doesn't sit right in my mind, I need to ask more questions. That's what makes a great investigator. So what I wanted to show people is that I'm actually looking out for everyone's best interest when I'm asking these questions, and people shouldn't be afraid to ask questions in the land of the free.
Now, I want to talk more about police training, because I do report on police abuse on a regular basis, and you've all seen these videos where they just walk in and they start yelling, contradicting orders many times. Put your hands up, put your hands down, do this, lay down, stand up, right. And then they end up killing the guy. And the guy, a lot of times, he's confused. He may be mentally ill, or maybe just drunk. Right. And he ends up getting shot. And at the same time, I've seen videos from Colombia or Thailand or England where the cops have a completely different way of dealing with these situations, and right. They do it very effectively. Right. What is different with the training in this country?
And again, I believe America is on a ever increasingly road to a police state. Right now, I believe we're in a soft police state. You can still pretty much go out and do what you need to. Our training is basically do as I tell you, don't question us, and I have the authority. I'm armed, you're not, and do as I say. And what I've noticed in other countries, the law enforcement seem to have a love for their people, and because we have this this melting pot of cultures here in America, I guess it's easy for us to get disconnected from one another. It's easy for me to look at someone, if you're in that mindset, and say, you're not my brother, you're not my sister or uncle or whoever, and treat them unfairly. And I think in America there's a disconnect between
I've always assumed that cops are trained to view the rest of us as enemy combatants, because that's the way they treat us. I mean, they treat everybody like we're foreign enemies, and we haven't right. even been accused of anything illegal.
Trust no one.
Right? They say you're suspicious. So how do they train you to view us as all suspicious and doing some crime when we're not doing anything? Well,
again, when law enforcement is about stats and getting arrests and writing tickets, when you go out there and they'll show you, let's say you go into roll call and you watch a video of a cop getting shot. So now they tell you to go out on the road and do police work. So now you have this hypersensitivity of this person I stop might jump out and shoot me. So now I'm hyper aggressive. I'm hypersensitive to you resisting me, because now if I ask you to do something and you question me, oh, are you going to jump out and shoot? Things like that.
How many times have you pulled out your gun in your career?
Many times. I haven't pulled it out since I started treating people and not looking for victimless crimes. I've maybe now a handful of times, pull it out on certain house or burglary calls and things like that. But as far as traffic stops, I haven't pulled it out in many years on a traffic stop.
How many times have you been genuinely fearing for your life?
Handful of times. There were a couple of armed robberies, a couple of loose dogs. Those are the scary ones, the loose dogs.
You shoot dogs?
No, I haven't shot, but it was a really big dog, and I didn't want to end up on Channel 7, so I was praying that the owner came out, and they did.
Okay, I just got a text. I lost my train of thought.
Training.
What percentage of your colleagues do you think understand what the First Amendment is all about?
Truly understand? My colleagues, percentage-wise, I would say 50%.
Do you think learning what the First Amendment's about made you a better cop?
Oh, definitely. Learning about the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, and just learning, in general, all the articles and amendments of the Constitution. Definitely.
I'm particular First Amendment lawyer.
Oh, so definitely.
I cover one piece of term.
Yeah, we got Mark One Don's out here. We'll pan over to him in a minute. Now, do you believe cops use the whole fear for their lives excuse a little bit too much? It seems like they do it all the time.
Well, if you get into a situation and you happen to use your weapon and discharge it at someone and actually kill someone, you're basically taught you better articulate what you need to say in order to cover yourself. So there is training on, stop resisting. I thought it looked like a gun, and if you can convince the jury or your employers or your supervisors that you were genuinely in fear for your life, and I guess 9 times out of 10 you're probably going to not get convicted.
So they train you to say that? They're basically training you to lie?
They train you to, I don't want my colleagues to come after me, but they definitely, if you're going to pull your weapon, you should obviously have genuine fear for your life. But again, if something should happen and you don't, you best, in your internal affairs investigation, better say that your life was in danger.
Right, because you know how to say that. You don't necessarily have to be. You just know that for your own protection.
Right, and I guess it's understandable that the average citizen is probably going to say, well, the cop, he did run and the officer was in fear, and they're probably going to side with the officer.
Now, let's talk about cameras, body cameras. Do you wear a body camera? Does your department have body cameras?
Our agency currently does not, but I'm all for it. And, again, as a constitutional officer, I don't predict that I'm going to go out there and violating one's rights, that I'm afraid to be seen. If anything, they're going to get a lot of downtime because I'm not I'm not harassing people. So I'm all for cameras.
And what about your colleagues?
I think a lot of them are against it. Again, when you're under this constant surveillance, you have to behave a certain way. You can't do certain things, and I think that's for a lot of my colleagues. They don't want that constant surveillance. But we got cameras everywhere. So for me, I see that this is the way society's going, where Big Brother is going to be on every corner already.
Right.
Big Brother's already in your cell phone, your laptops, and things like that. So for me, I just said, I know my agency has a right to impose a camera on me, but I'm not going to invite it into my home and things like that.
Of course not. And tell us about your arrest a few years ago.
Well, I originally was arrested when I first became an activist, as I would say, in 2013 for not removing my mask or wearing a mask in public by Plantation Police Department. And what I was protesting at the time was Obamacare. I just thought, again, it's not the government's duty to impose an individual to buy into a corporation. And that's what Obamacare does. It benefits corporations and hurts the individual. Some individuals, there might be a few million individuals that benefit for Obamacare, but to impose it on all Americans, I thought it was a violation of, again, our rights.
Right. And what was the outcome of that arrest? You were wearing a mask?
The charges were dropped about 3 weeks later. It never made it to court. I guess they looked at the facts of the case and recognized that I was well within my rights.
Right. Any other questions? I know I have a bunch.
Yeah, they'll come to you afterwards.
Anything else you want to say?
I can't think of anything.
Tell us about your shirt.
Police state. A police state is great as long as you're a police. Like I said, I recognize that I won't always be a police officer, and for me to be silent on issues that I see that are infringement on our rights would make it me complicit in the police state. And I guess we can go back to the Parkland shooting and the Sandy Hook and the Vegas shooting. In order to bring about a police state, you're going to need a certain amount of crime. You're going to need a certain amount of terrorism. You're going to need a certain amount of perceived fear in the public in order for the government to say come in as to be your savior. So I believe some of these things, a lot of people don't want to believe it. I believe some of these things are orchestrated in order to bring in this fear culture. I mean, you can't have a car backfire today without people hyperventilating and causing a mass stampede. So with this fear culture we're living in, the government is going to come in with more laws and requesting more taxes in order to keep you safe.
Now, did you read a story earlier this week where 2 deputies were shot and killed in North Florida outside the Jacksonville area, and the sheriff came out and said this is a result of people in this country demonizing police officers.
Yeah, see,
although the guy who did it was some loner who had issues according to his record,
right.
and we don't know much about him, but he just shot into a diner where the 2 deputies were having lunch and shot him dead.
Sure. I don't know much of the details on it, but again, this culture where they're pitting the law enforcement against the individual, this us against them mentality. And as we continue to get some of this violence, as we continue to see some of this perceived violence, this is where the police state is going to come about. You know, we now own, or we have a MRAP at our station because, you know, potential terrorism.
And what is that?
An MRAP, mine-resistant armored personnel vehicle. This is basically a tank on wheels. It's 6 tons, I believe, and it's meant to take explosive devices. So for me, when I came in and I saw that, I'm thinking, okay, this is definitely in the direction of a police state. But they're going to have to create more terrorism. There's going to have to be more violence to happen before people recognize, okay, now we're thankful that the police agency has this this armored vehicle.
Now, we have a huge division in this country between police and the citizens that are sworn to protect and serve. How do we solve that?
It's going to take the citizens to, you know, make their voices heard in the agencies. I see firsthand when a small percentage of a city comes into the station or the city hall and voice their opinion and genuinely upset about something, and not just do it once, but be continuous about it. I think that the citizens raising their voice in education. We first have to understand what our rights are. If you don't know your rights, you don't know when they're being violated. So I think the individual, we need to become educated on our rights and history, because history does repeat itself.
It does. Okay, Mark, any questions? Mark, want to come up and say something for the camera? We have Mark Mendoza here, First Amendment attorney, visiting Miami, and you know,
well, I have an office in Miami.
Yes, you do.
Yeah,
and I wanted you to be here because this is a First Amendment case, in my opinion.
Right.
What do you have to say?
Well, I'm, you know, when I hear a police officer has taken it on themselves to learn about the First Amendment and to learn about the constitutional rights that they swear to uphold and protect, that makes me happy as a citizen. I feel safer. I mean, believe me, some of your views, I don't know what to make of them, but what I really make something of is I feel safer knowing that somebody who understands what they have sworn to uphold and defend has taken the time to learn what that is. If that were more common in more police departments, I think we would have far more cooperation between citizens and police and far less of this tension that you were discussing earlier, Bill.
I agree with you. I mean, I don't agree with his views on the hoax thing, but you know, you're not going around beating people. You're not going around falsely arresting people.
Right.
And so, in my opinion, those are the worst cops. You know, you're expressing your views on Facebook. I mean, I have a whole bunch of friends who say the same thing.
Right, right.
And that's the way it is.
Right, and I have friends on my Facebook page that espouse the flat earth. I don't even touch that. But yeah,
so you're not a flat earther.
I'm not a flat earther.
Yeah,
but again, for them, God bless them.
So
but yeah, exactly.
They
God
have
bless
every
them.
right to be a flat earther. You know, it's
But again, I don't know. I don't. There's not a.
You haven't been around the world.
I haven't been in space, so I can't say. But I know what they teach us in school, so that's.
Okay, I am going to put this up on YouTube in its entirety, and I encourage readers to ask questions because I try to cover a lot, but I know there's a lot of unanswered questions. And so if readers have any questions, hopefully they can post it up on the video. We're here in South Beach, by the way. Check it out. If people are down there, it's pretty cool. The weather's not so great right now because it's about to rain, but we're up here in the W Hotel. It's a little inexpensive hotel, right?
yeah, just you know, it's a humble little place on the beach.
Cool, man. So, any last thoughts?
Again, if I can think of anything, ladies and gentlemen, it's 2018. We live in an age of technology and media manipulation. So, if something doesn't sit right with you, question it. There's no harm in questioning.
Actually, you know, I do. Before we sign off, I want you to give us some advice of how we can handle cops who are overly aggressive if we get pulled over and they start maybe barking unlawful orders. For example, in one case I just wrote about in California, West Covina police officers were basically dragged a woman out of her car. She was a passenger in a car where she was holding up her phone, and the cop said, "Put that phone down. It may be a weapon." She insisted on holding on to the phone. Next thing you know, she was dragged down and placed in handcuffs.
Right. And
how can a citizen, what can we do in a situation like that?
One of my best videos I saw on YouTube was a gentleman that goes around, he just says, he tells the officer, I don't answer questions. He doesn't get into an argument with him, and his only thing is, I don't answer questions. And he's recording this, so he's showing, you know, his documentation that he's not being aggressive, he's not, you know, being violent toward the officer. It's clearly a phone or whatever he's using to record. And don't ask questions. You have a right to not incriminate yourself. So don't ask questions. Don't answer questions. You have a right to ask, but you don't have a right to answer questions.
Right, but if the cop continues to tell you, put that phone down, and you know if you put it down, there's a chance that the phone might fall flat on the lens where you're not recording anything.
Correct.
And you want to hold on to it. What do you do in that situation? I mean, do you have the right to hold on to the phone if you're not a suspect in a crime that she wasn't?
I would say you do, and I would just say, just continue to say, I don't answer questions, or, you know, am I being detained if you're out on foot, or what's the, you know, what's the reason you're being stopped? What was your probable cause to pull me over, officer? And you don't have to ask a question, just and then record.
And do you have anything to say to the officers who do that type of stuff?
Relax, relax. I mean, again, not the 99.9% of the population is just trying to get from point A to point B. The criminal population, that's a handful. So the average person you're going to come in contact with as a law enforcement officer is going to be a person just trying to make a living. They're not criminal. And yes, and it is very...
recording you was probably extremely unlikely to also be a guy who wants to shoot.
Exactly. And again, on that same note, a guy recording you is not going to be someone that's really looking to hurt you. You know, he's documenting himself. And a guy that's telling the officer, hey, officer, I'm armed, he's not going to be one that's going to pull a gun on him. He's telling you, he's trying to be upfront with you that he's armed, that he has a right to be armed, and to relax. So many times I've seen people tell an officer that they're armed, and next thing you know, you're being pulled out of the car, you're having your car searched, and now the officer is handling your personal firearm, and you know that can go wrong. So.
Yeah, I was in court after my first arrest and had a cop who was like twice my size told the jury that this guy Carlos Miller, he's a big guy, and there were 5 cops, and we had to handle them, and I had like 2 cameras on me.
Right, yeah, your camera is a real threat, because they'll, you know, what they'll do is in police training is they'll show you maybe an article where a camera had a gun inside. So your camera, or a cell phone that's shaped like a gun.
Did that ever happen?
Exactly. I don't think it has, but they found maybe a gun smuggled in a belt buckle or something like that. So now
James Bond, even Q never invented anything like that.
Exactly. I mean, so you know, you'll see little emails like that that show you a gun. Funny looking gun, so now officers are super sensitive on it.
Right. Now, again, going back to your career, you know, I mean, I asked if you had feared for your life, and you mentioned some incidents, but you didn't mention anything during a traffic stop. Were there any traffic stops where you genuinely feared for your life, where the guy was reaching his waistband or doing something like that?
Me personally, Carlos, no. Again, this was, I would have to say, you know, years ago that where I've stopped. I worked a lot of my career on night shift, so you have this element of darkness and people moving, you know, suspiciously, if you want to say that. But I've never had my life actually threatened on a traffic stop. Does it happen? Sure. But again, that 99% of the time is the person's just trying to get from point A to point B.
Did they, in your department, did they ever talk to you about citizens who record in public, record cops?
There's a little bit of discussion on it, and it's basically, yeah, people have a right to record.
And when did that start? When did they start talking about that?
Oh, I would say when we started seeing more of these issues make it to the news.
Because of you, Carlos.
Yes.
Yes. Take credit.
Yes. The more people see it in the, you know, especially thanks to Facebook. You know, Facebook again has become a law enforcement tool. You know, it's become a, you know, definitely a First Amendment where people are voicing their opinion on certain things, and so I definitely think PNAC and Facebook has definitely spread brought this to attention.
Now, if you get reinstated, are you going to continue posting stuff on Facebook?
Again, as a cop, I recognize that I had to be, you know, censor myself. I don't use profanity. I will continue to voice my, you know, concerns when I see something that it doesn't look appropriate. I don't see really what I did wrong, so I want to say, like I say, I'm sorry, but I called them actors. I didn't call them, you know, assholes.
Right. Now, I'm glad you mentioned that, because some of the feedback I've been receiving because I'm Facebook friends with you, is, oh, you hurt the families of these victims, and that's the main thing. Oh, in a time of, you know, this very sad time, you hurt them. Do you have anything to say about that?
As an investigator, I'm a frontline investigator, and sometimes when you question facts of a case, you might ruffle some feathers. I mean, if I'm questioning you and I call you a fucking liar, I'm sorry, I don't know if I say that, I might ruffle your feathers, but I'm not trying to be your friend at the time. I'm trying to get to the bottom of a case. So as an investigator, sometimes you have to ruffle feathers, and I wouldn't be doing my job. I wouldn't be effectively serving the citizens of North Miami Beach if I didn't ask questions.
Okay, so just for the record, the cop who says he doesn't curse, but I'll take blame for that because I curse, and I don't have a problem with that.
Right. Again, I definitely censor myself, but my mission is not to offend anyone. My mission is just try to just get people to think and ask certain questions when they see something that doesn't quite fit.
Okay, man.
Thank you, Carlos.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
All right, brother.